Hey, all, welcome to another episode of the Redzone Rodeo. We're thankful for all of y'all joining us today as we cover a number of topics relating to the United Football League and the National Football League. A lot of great stuff happened this past week, especially with it being kickoff weekend for the UFL. But as you guys know, the draft is only a couple weeks away. So the NFL news and player visits to each of the 32 different teams is happening right now. People getting ready for the draft. So we're going to cover a little bit of everything tonight that's been happening recently in the football world. But to start us off, Rob, how about them Renegades? What happened? What
Oh
happened this
man.
week?
Oh man, it was really bad. The worst part is that they were leading for a while in that game, all the way through like the third quarter. They had a lead, and they had a chance coming out of the half to go make it an even bigger lead because they got the ball back already leading by a score, and they did nothing with it. I think you saw a lot of problems with the Renegades roster. Number one among them, I think, is the offensive line. Luis Perez had no time to throw. When he was comfortable and in the pocket and he had the ability to sit there and read the field, he made some pretty amazing throws. That was when the offense was at its most efficient. But as the game went on, he had less and less and less time to do that. There were a few throws he missed. He wasn't the most consistent quarterback, but most of the time when he had a chance to throw that ball, he did a good job with it. I think he started out like 9 for 9 or 10 for 10 or something like that. Like it was a while into the game before he even missed a pass. In addition, another thing that's wrong with the offense is the offensive coordinator. I can't tell you how many drives I saw that it would go run on first down, run on second down, pass on third down. That is the most dull, stale way you could possibly run an offense. Everyone else in both the UFL and the NFL is like miles and miles beyond that. This is the worst offensive game plan you could have: run, run, pass. That's the type of stuff Jason Garrett did with the Cowboys 10 years ago that, got him fired. Not 10 years ago. Feels like 10 years ago, but it's not. It was just terrible, terrible offensive play calling, and it made me sick to my stomach to watch it just happen repeatedly. Even when the Renegades were trailing by several scores, they just kept running the ball up the middle, getting no gain, and then passing on a third and long, and not being able to do that effectively because of the pass rush. It's sad because they really have the offensive pieces to go out there and be an explosive offense. Their wide receivers played phenomenally, their tight ends played phenomenally, they have a great quarterback room. If they could just get their blocking figured out and start play calling a little better, I think you'd have a great offense. On the defensive side of things, oh boy, oh man, the run defense was non-existent. I think you have holes at defensive tackle and linebacker. Basically, the entire middle of the defense is just vulnerable. I think at edge, you secured the edge well. You didn't allow any big runs to the outside. I think your corners also did a pretty good job most of the game, outside of the few big passes they gave up late. That allowed the Stallions to take the lead, which obviously isn't great. But for the most part, they held those Stallions wide receivers and quarterbacks in check. Um, I felt pretty good about the secondary. I felt pretty good about the edge. We didn't really get a lot of pressure on their quarterback, but the Stallions have a pretty good offensive line. Um, so I guess what we'll have to see, in the coming weeks is this just because the Stallions are just that good. Their defense is just that phenomenal that our offensive line looked terrible, even though compared to maybe the rest of the league, it's average. Uh, Questions like that will be answered as the games are played. But overall, you got holes on defensive tackle, at linebacker, at offensive line, and the offensive play calling was bad. And those are the four main reasons I think we lost. I don't really know how we can address the roster issues, in the UFL right now because it's not exactly a large pool of talent to draw from. Just waiting. I guess there are 8 teams worth of players that are still out there, so maybe you could bring in some of those guys that got cut and maybe deserve to be on a team to see if you could address some of those issues. In terms of offensive play calling, that could absolutely get better. I hope Bob Stoops realizes what's happening and makes a change there quickly, and hopefully we won't see a stale play calling next week. But yeah, definitely a lot
Yeah,
to talk about with the Renegades.
Yeah, one thing I was really surprised about was on the Stallion side of the ball was we did not see Jamar Smith once during that game. At least none to my knowledge. All we saw was Matt Corral and Adrian Martinez at quarterback. Something I thought was interesting because, that was always kind of the question leading into the season. You have Smith, who's been already with the system working with Skip Holtz, and for him not to come out at all, that was something very interesting. But at the same time, it it made sense why he was not out there, because Matt Corral was absolutely lighting it up. I would say more kind of the second rotation when came in after Adrian Martinez's kind of was it an ankle injury or a leg injury? I forget
I
off
think
the
it was
top
an
of my
ankle, right?
head.
Yep.
Ankle, yeah, when it got crushed by the defender. But that was something that I thought once Adrian Martinez came into the game, the Roughnecks, or not Roughnecks, I'm sorry, the Renegades couldn't really defend his running ability. Like it seemed like he was running
Yeah.
all over the place. Um, and so, I mean, you can even think about like, oh my goodness, how much worse of the game could have gone if Adrian Martinez was still in there. But all in all, sucks that he's injured. Hopefully he'll bounce back next week. Hopefully it's not that egregious of injury. I don't know the extent of the injury that Martinez suffered. But Matt Corral, once he started to get into those reps, he really paved a way where I can see that this Stallions team could easily be one of the best teams in the league. And I think that's something that, obviously it's just the first game. There's no preseason in the UFL. So a lot of times these players for the first time on their respective squads are coming out and playing without really having game like reps. So there is going to be some of that, some of those penalties, some of those maybe offensive line problems where it's not gelling, or quarterbacks maybe needing to get a little bit more reps in before they start to find their rhythm. Um, so absolutely, but interesting game to open up the season. Um, Something that I will say as well, and this affected even my team, which is the Roughnecks. Um, was I really do feel like this opening weekend of the UFL is kind of like a preseason a little bit run. Obviously, it counts record wise, but a lot of the members of the Roughnecks that were playing, I felt that there were some issues involved that ended up just kind of throwing them all off, that I hope can be easy fixes, because it seems like it can be an easy fix. When the Roughnecks were playing the Showboats, which was the last slotted game on Easter Sunday, um, their defense was really honestly good, in my opinion. Reuben Foster led that kind of core out and really did a good job of stopping Case Cookus and the Showboats' explosive offense. The Roughnecks went down early in the game due to some mistakes, due to some fumbles. But realistically, it was kind of the tale of two different sides of the football. Whereas the defense played really, really well for the majority of the game, but we couldn't get anything offensively going. And there was like positives and negatives in both regard, because on the defense, we did very good job of holding Case Cookus and his extreme arm talent and the receivers that they have on the Showboats team. We were holding them pretty much to threes and outs, but then we would make stupid penalties that would just give them first downs, that would just give them, more yards and more things. And the Roughnecks defense has to clean up those penalties if they want to be that strong defense that goes out and is one of the best defenses in the league. They got to cut down on those silly mistakes, because those silly mistakes cost us so much yardage and a couple scores, honestly, where the defense could have walked that offense off the field. Offensively, obviously, the loss of Mark Thompson not being in this game played a big role. The run game was almost non-existent with TJ Pledger. Even though that our offensive line was super good when it came to one of the best in the league, actually, in week one, when it came to blocking for the run. The non-existent run game was just, honestly, I just don't know if that's because TJ Pledger is just not that great of a running back, or if there were some of those channels that just collapsed before they could really exploit them. But what I'm excited about is when Mark Thompson makes his return, which could even be week 2 at the earliest. Haven't really heard any official news on that. But if Mark Thompson comes in, that's super hopeful to get this offense that was just really just not great for 3/4 of football. Um, there was a lot of struggles offensively for the Roughnecks. Offensive line, when it came to pass rush, was bad. Um, Honestly, I was super surprised with the quarterback play. Jarrett Guarantano was great, honestly, in his debut for the Roughnecks. Having throwing 157 passing yards, he was basically pressured on almost every single drop back, his agility to get out of the pocket when it collapsed on him. All great things. The one thing I just had a question about is literally during the entire game, the wide receivers for the Roughnecks, um, 9 of them had receptions in the game, 9. And we only saw 1 reception from Justin Hall, 2 from Anthony Ratliff Williams, and just 2 was, I think, the max. Maybe I could be incorrect about that, but most of the wide receivers on the Roughnecks got maybe 1 to 2 like shots at the ball and receptions. And that was kind of crazy to me because last year with the Gamblers, especially with the last 2 guys that I named, Justin Hall and Anthony Ratliff Williams, they were the guys that were making huge plays on the wings, running down and making these huge completions, giving them the yards that they needed. So kind of seeing that stagnated was just kind of frustrating as a Roughnecks fan. And it was just honestly a bad day all around, really. There was obviously positives, some negatives. I just really hope the Roughnecks can clean up their game. Um, but I don't know. They certainly didn't play like a team that is one of the teams competing for the UFL championship this week. Uh, like I said before, hopefully it's just week 1. And there's the struggles of week 1 with being no preseason. But we'll see. Happy that Guarantano came out and played really well. That makes me feel a lot better when it comes to the quarterback position. But man, do we really need Mark Thompson and especially Chris Odom to come back? Because our defense was missing Chris Odom. And Rob, can you imagine Chris Odom, Adam Rodriguez, Reuben Foster, all trying to get at the quarterback, making big plays? I mean, this defense can only go up as if they just clean up those penalties, which were just killing them almost the entire game. So fingers crossed that they clean that up because they need to.
Yeah, though that would certainly be a fearsome pass rush if they can get all of those guys on the field at the same time, whether that be health or anything else related. Um, I think there's a lot of merit to your point about this being kind of like a preseason sort of thing. You remember last year the Renegades, I think, won like 4 games in the regular season, and then they went on to win the championship. So,
Yeah.
uh, because there's so few teams, it's pretty easy to get a playoff spot as long as you don't end up just collapsing all season long. So, both of our teams having losses this early in the season, not really the end of the world as long as they clean up their act, as I think both teams, have the ability to do. It is kind of sad. I was looking at the PFF overall grades for every team, and the Roughnecks were 8 and the Renegades were 7. So dead last and second to last. Hopefully, we'll turn that around next week. Things will be a little different. But for now, you and I, our teams, not doing so bueno. I do have to say I was very impressed by the Stallions. Just all around their ability to run the ball, especially. I wasn't that impressed with their ability to throw it. I
Yeah.
mean, I know they had like a few big time throws, but most of the time their passing game was not working very well. They
Mm.
ran it much more efficiently than they passed it, in my opinion. And I think that's a weakness that can be exploited by teams with stronger defenses,
Yeah.
especially teams with better defense up the middle. Because if you can force them to throw the ball and stop them from just ramming it down your throat up the middle the way they did the Renegades, I don't think the Stallions are impervious.
Yeah.
I still am not sold on them being the team to win it all this year. But they certainly looked like they were the best team in the league this weekend. So you
They
have to
came
say
out of
I
the
was.
gates firing. It was crazy to see.
Yeah, I mean, well, they started off really slow,
Yeah.
throwing the ball a lot, and that didn't work out for them. They threw, I think, like 2 interceptions within the first quarter. Um, Once they started just running the ball and not even really trying to throw it, that's when things kind of broke wide open for them. We just could not stop that. So if you can stop the Stallions running game, I think you have a pretty good chance of beating them as a team. The question is, can anyone stop their running game? Because it just looked absolutely unstoppable and dominant this weekend. So the
Well,
Roughnecks, they might have the best chance to do it because they had PFF's highest graded run defense
they
this week.
did, which was super surprising because Rob, as you and I used to be New Jersey General fans, the guy that the Roughnecks went up against on the showboats was Darius Victor, thick thighs, save lives. And all season long for the Generals for the 2 seasons, he was dominant. He was like a miniature Derrick Henry that just was a bowling ball that just you couldn't stop him. I kid you not, Rob. The Roughnecks, I don't even think he got more than 10 yards I literally don't think the entire game. And it was because the Roughnecks, the defense that they had was super good at stopping the run. And like I said, the defense was outstanding watching them play, but then they made stupid, silly penalties and mistakes that just cost them penalties after penalty after penalty and got them into deep water. But absolutely, yeah. If the Stallions offense is dictated by the run, then I think the team in their division that can stop it the best could potentially even be the Roughnecks, which is even surprising to say, seeing that the Stallions are one of the better teams in the league after week one, and the Roughnecks are rated one of the worst teams. So um,
Absolutely.
it'll obviously be super interesting to see. But as we mentioned multiple times, I don't count out the Roughnecks defense, and seeing it in action on Sunday was great to see because it wasn't like, oh well, on paper they're good, but in person they're not. Um, they actually it started to get to work for them, which was good.
Yep. Speaking of Jersey Generals, don't they also have Jersey Generals defensive tackle Toby Johnson, the
We
Roughneck,
do.
right?
We do. Yes. And he came up big, huge plays. He halted the Showboats in one of their beginning drives on the goal line and forced them to kick a field goal. It was, yeah, one of their first drives. I forget if it was the first or the second. But he was, that red zone defense, especially when it came to the goal line, was fabulous when it came to the Roughnecks. So uh, if they can keep that up, I think that this team can certainly hold teams from scoring because all game Case Cookus looked really good. For most of the game, he was throwing balls accurately, getting it to the receivers in places where I was like, how did he even fit it in there? Vinny Papali, the son of Vince Papali from Invincible, the movie, the Eagles guy, he played outstanding. That double toe tap in the end zone catch. Um, Obviously, I hated that it was against us, but really, they have some talent on that Showboats team. So I don't know. I don't know. Week one was certainly disappointing when it came to our teams, Rob. But honestly, I think the good thing is it could really go up from here. And it's not like, oh, the whole season's done. It's just one game. So
Yeah. Well, to go from one depressing team to another depressing team, there was some Cowboys news that broke this past week. Ian Rappaport reported that the Cowboys have zero plans to extend Dak Prescott anytime soon, which is kind of opening up the pathway for him to get to unrestricted free agency next offseason. Some Cowboys insiders came in and kind of clarified afterwards that there are ongoing negotiations between the Cowboys and Dak Prescott, but they don't expect to get anything done before the season. And they certainly don't expect anything to get done, anytime soon. Something might get done during like the period right before free agency in 2025. So like, sometime in February of 2025, uh, or March, early March. That was the time they pointed to. They said this is like the only time you might see like an actual extension come between the Cowboys and Dak Prescott. But it certainly doesn't feel good. The chances the Cowboys have of re-signing him. So yeah, seems like after this year, Dak Prescott might not be a Cowboy anymore, which would honestly be soul crushing. I love Dak Prescott. I've been a big fan. I've always been a supporter of Dak Prescott all through his entire career with the Cowboys, all 8 years of it now, I think. 8 years, yeah. Um, since day one, I've just been in his corner, rooting for him, loving everything he does on the field. I've been critical of him sometimes when he's deserved it, but I've always defended him against all the crazy Dak Prescott haters out there. And it's really sad to think this is probably his last ride as a Dallas Cowboy. So that's depressing. But might be even more depressing is that they are considering bringing back his 2016 draft mate, Ezekiel Elliott. It seems like there is a really strong mutual interest between the Cowboys and Zeke in a return for him, which, I mean, don't get me wrong. I love Zeke. It was so much fun watching him do the, feed me thing and just run people over in 2016 and 17. But the man is either close to 30 or 30, and he averaged 2.9 yards a carry last season. And that was an improvement for him from how he was playing with the Cowboys. If Ezekiel Elliott is your answer in the running back room, oh man, that is sad. That is really sad. Like I said, I love Ezekiel Elliott, the person, But I think Rico Dowdle is better than Ezekiel Elliott is right now. I think I'd want to see Deuce Vaughn on the field instead of Ezekiel Elliott right now. I think I'd want to see whichever rookie you end up drafting this year on the field as opposed to Ezekiel Elliott right now. I think I'd rather
Yeah.
see Hunter Lipke on the field right now. Why are you going to go sign this man that you're paying $6 million in dead cap already? He's averaged 2.9 yards a carry. That's worse than your team did last year. Don't do it. Please. I love Zeke. Look, I have the 21 shirt on right now. But please do not re-sign Ezekiel Elliott and make him a prominent part of the offense next year. That's not going to make us any better. That's going to make us substantially worse. Oh,
Do
oh
you
man.
think having a veteran running back, like let's say the Cowboys go out and they maybe pick up a running back in the third round or fourth round or something like that, do you think having Zeke being kind of a veteran to kind of like guide him would be any help, or would it just be a lost cause?
No, absolutely not. I think Rico Dowdle's been in the league a few years now. You know, he
Yeah.
has some sort of guidance to provide. We have running backs coaches for that reason. I
Yeah.
feel like running back is the easiest position to pick up going from
True.
college to the NFL. So the need for that kind of veteran player to sit behind is pretty non-existent at that position. If anything, I think all Ezekiel Elliott would do would hamper, the production or the growth of a possible rookie because he would probably be getting snaps that would help that rookie grow.
Yeah.
The Cowboys have shown that when Ezekiel Elliott is on their team, he's the guy that's going to play at running back, no matter who else you have on the roster behind him. I mean, that's evidenced by Zeke starting over Tony Pollard for years, even when Tony Pollard was clearly the much better running back.
Yeah.
Uh, they love Ezekiel Elliott, and there's no way he'll be on the team as a backup or even like a third string running back, which is probably what he should be. So
Yeah.
I'm begging you, Cowboys, please do not bring Ezekiel Elliott back. I know it's probably going to happen, but I'm not happy about it at all.
Yeah. No, that's completely fair. I feel like, going back to your Dak comments, the Derrick Henry leaving Tennessee and Dak Prescott leaving Dallas, uh, they probably hit the same nerve. But the thing is even with the Titans, Derrick Henry left, but this offseason with the amount of moves that they have made, um, the Titans have transitioned themselves from a team where it was like, who do we have? Derrick Henry. What are we going to do? Run it down your throat. Everybody knew what that strategy was. Well, now that Derrick Henry's gone, the Titans now have the ability to pivot and be whatever they want to be in terms of a team offensively. And maybe there's going to be some of those similar things with potentially Dak moving on, whether it's next season when the contracts ended and he walks in free agency. I mean, maybe they get a deal done. I'm not sure, but maybe you'll see a different kind of thing because, of course, with Trey Lance, he's still kind of, we don't really know what talent he has yet. He played a couple games for San Francisco. He could be the next big thing. But he's definitely, I wouldn't say Trey Lance and Dak Prescott are look-alike quarterbacks in how they operate. So, having the mobility of Trey Lance could open up a lot of different possibilities for them. And even with Dak walking, potentially, all the money that you would have been paying him, you now have in the cap space room to go out and maybe get some really nice free agents to put around Trey Lance with CD Lamb, and some of those other guys that are on that roster. So, as much as it does suck to have like this star player that you watched for years be potentially leaving, and in the case of Derrick Henry, leave, it could also lead to positive things. Obviously the sadness of having that player leave is tough. But there's always that hope that, okay, it's the end of this era. Let's usher in the new era. What can we do better? Because I mean, the fact of the matter is with both Dak and Derrick Henry, both of those players didn't get us to Super Bowls. Our teams didn't make it all the way. They may have made it far in the playoffs, but not anywhere close, in realism and in reality. And so, maybe these pivots by the Cowboys or the Titans, whether it's next season for you, this season for the Titans, it could be what these teams need to finally win the ultimate game, which is the goal of every team and the goal of every roster and every coach. So, there's definitely positives on the horizon too. But obviously losing a generational talent player like Dak Prescott at quarterback, no matter what people say about him. You look at the stats, you look at what all he's been able to do. He's been a top quarterback in the league for years. It's going to suck losing him, but there's that hope that things will end up working out even better with him gone potentially.
Well, you're more of an optimist than I am, Carson. I just know that for a lot of teams, it's hard to find that guy who's your franchise quarterback.
Yeah.
There's teams that have been looking for, decades at this point to find a guy who's like an all pro MVP type level franchise quarterback. I mean, when was the last time the Tennessee Titans had a guy like that? When was the last time a lot of teams have had a guy
Yeah.
like that?
It's
It's
true.
really, really hard to find a quarterback who can play at that level. And once you find one, you should probably not let him leave. I mean, it just seems like that's a pretty accepted piece of knowledge across the NFL. But apparently, the Cowboys don't need to listen to that knowledge, and they're just going to let him walk away. If we do end up letting Dak Prescott walk, that means we'll be eating $40 million in dead cap space next year because of the way his contract is structured, followed by I think around 20 million the year after that, and then it'll go down to like smaller, less terrible amounts. If he does leave, I hope that we build around Trey Lance because I know he hasn't really shown much in the NFL yet, but I feel like he has all the potential of a high first round pick, which is where he was originally selected. He's just never really had the chance to prove it. I think there's a reason Jerry Jones went out to get him. And if you put him in that offense and let him get some snaps in, he's only, he's young. He's got this whole future ahead of him, his whole career. I think you could definitely see him turn into a good player. I don't know if he'll ever be at a Dak Prescott type level of quarterback, but he could definitely be a starter, that takes the Cowboys to the playoffs with how well their roster is built most of the time. So, yeah, we'll see what happens with that. Speaking, of the future and roster building, there were some Cowboys top 30 draft visits that were released today. To be clear, these are just players that the Cowboys wanted to speak more with. It doesn't really speak to how they have them ranked on their board. It doesn't necessarily mean these are like the top players on their board or anything like that. These are just players that the Cowboys wanted to speak with more and have potential interest in drafting. The list was they only released 16 of the 30 names, but they were pretty heavy on linebacker, which is no surprise. We don't really have a starting caliber linebacker right now that has proven himself outside of Eric Hendricks, who's 32 and kind of on the downswing of his career. They had linebackers from pretty much every potential round, including Peyton Wilson and Edgerrin Cooper, who might be like first or second round guys, probably second round guys. And they had guys like Jordan McGee, who might be going like on day 3. What was interesting to me was they also had the defensive tackle Byron Murphy, who, in my opinion, is a top 10 player in this draft class. Definitely the best defensive tackle, in my opinion, better than Jerzon Newton out of, I think, Illinois. Just super explosive, 300 pounds of pure muscle, can play the run and the pass. Loved watching him in college. That tells me, at least, that the Cowboys think there's some possibility that he'll slide all the way to 24 if they're bringing him in for a top 30 visit. I don't think they'd be talking to him if they thought he'd be gone before they're even on the clock. So that was exciting to see. They're also bringing in some wide receivers. Actually, some notable names. I think they're bringing in Jordan Malachi. They've been talking with a few, second, third round guys. They've also been talking with some offensive linemen like Graham Barton. So it definitely seems like the Cowboys' plan is offensive line and linebacker and wide receiver and running back early on, and then everything else can kind of come later in the draft. Because they were also talking to guys like Trey Benson and Jonathan Brooks, who will probably be among the top running backs selected. So, it's just interesting to see what you can learn from top 30 visits. It's always informative. The Cowboys usually do end up selecting in the first round a guy who was a top 30 visit. Mozzie Smith was one last year. So when you're looking at this list of guys, usually it'll give you a pretty good idea of who they're looking at in the first round.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely very helpful. I know the Titans ended up meeting with Joe Alt, which is, and a lot of the other tackles, offensive linemen that were pretty highly ranked. There's kind of that general consensus that, the Titans are most likely going to be going offensive linemen. But who knows? They could splash around. Rome Odunze, Malik Neighbors were two of the wide receivers that the Titans end up meeting with, as well as Brock Bowers. So, there could absolutely be some offensive weapon added even in the first round. We'll obviously have to see, but absolutely, I think that these 30, player visits are certainly the ability for these teams to kind of get to know who they are and who, how they could be an addition to the team, potential addition. But absolutely, I think that not only these visits with players reveal a lot about who they are as people, um, but obviously football skill is certainly one thing. But if your attitude isn't in the right place, especially which you can get from some of these meetings, then you might have to deal with other problems later down the road, not even related to football talent. So these visits are very, very important, and absolutely, it gives you a look at who these teams are looking at, um, and who may be in their uniform next year, respectively, Cowboys, Titans, whoever else you may be rooting for in the NFL. So yeah, super excited. Draft right here around the corner. Um, super, super exciting stuff.
Yeah. Carson, I do have a question for you. Maybe we'll make this the start of our Red Zone Rodeo go around. But
Okay.
if Brock Bowers, Joe Alt, and Romo Dunze are all sitting there when the Titans are on the clock, who are you picking and why?
I have kind of said this before, but I think that with all three of those options at play, I think that we should definitely go with Brock Bowers because I understand the need at offensive lineman. Um, I feel like we could end up picking up another guy later in the draft. I think Brock Bowers is one of those players that only comes around every so often. And the one thing why I think adding Brock Bowers to this team, not only giving Will Levis another option, but Brock Bowers is basically another wide receiver, just playing at the tight end spot. We saw what he was able to do at Georgia. Great things. Chigo Conquo certainly had his moments about 2 years ago, but last season he didn't really show up, and there's obviously a lot of reasons for that. But when you look around the league, especially in the AFC, and you look at the teams that succeed and make far and long playoff pushes, whether that be the Ravens with Mark Andrews, the Chiefs with Travis Kelce, the list goes on and on and on. Um, Having that number one tight end who is always there for the quarterback, whatever may happen, whether the play breaks down, if the receivers are covered, all that stuff, having a guy like Brock Bowers on the Titans, I think only betters the offense. And yes, we have DeAndre Hopkins. Yes, we have Calvin Ridley. Hopefully, Traylon Burks shapes up this year. But having that tight end piece there could make the difference in, okay, maybe we'll make the playoffs to, okay, we're going to push far into the playoffs. And I think having that asset, you can't really pass up on because there's not really good tight ends later in the draft that have the same talent level and draft prospect as Brock Bowers. And even in recent time, in the past couple of drafts, there hasn't been someone so highly ranked as Brock Bowers. So I think this is someone that if he's there at 7, I feel like you take him. You have to take him because, I know offensive line is a struggle and Joe Alt is probably a home run hit when it comes to offensive linemen. But I don't know, I feel like you can find some of those other offensive linemen later in the draft. So I would definitely go with Brock Bowers at 7. If it was up to me, I think that's the pick to go.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the notable football dynasties in recent memory, the Chiefs and the Patriots. Both of them have had, an amazing tight end who would just dominate over the middle.
Mhm.
It's becoming every day, I feel like more and more a necessary part of the game to have a dynamic playmaker at that position, which the Titans really don't right now.
Yeah.
So going to get a guy who might just not just be a dynamic playmaker, but might be among the best tight ends in the league, absolutely would be a game changer for the Titans offense. And I think that's probably the correct pick because I think the Titans are pretty good at wide receiver. Maybe not for a long time, but at least for this season with Hopkins and Ridley
Yeah.
and Traylon Burks. I think that's a pretty solid wide receiver trio. Um, Maybe you could get a guy in the second or third round to bolster
Yeah.
that a little more, like an Adonai Mitchell or someone like that, Xavier Worthy. Uh, but yeah, the draft is super deep at wide receiver. There's probably only one, two, maybe three at most notable tight ends. And like you said, offensive line is important, but if you don't have playmakers to throw the ball to, you're not really going to be one of those elite or dominant teams. You
Yeah.
need to have those guys in order to be up there with those contenders. So, especially when you have teams like the Chiefs with Mahomes to contend with, and you need to go score a lot of points to win. You need a guy like that, like Bowers, to go out there and be able to do something like that. So I think you're 100% right. That's absolutely the pick the Titans should make if all three of those guys are on the board at that point.
Yeah, and I think that's something also to point out too, because Mahomes and Kelsey kind of grew up together. Mark Andrews and Lamar Jackson kind of grew up together. Of course, I know they weren't same draft classes, whatnot, but having Will Levis, a second-year quarterback, with a rookie tight end and two of those components that could potentially grow together, they could be as dynamic as some of the dynamic quarterback tight end duos in this league. And you were right, Rob. You know that the league is always ever changing, and the dynasties that have happened, whether it's the Chiefs or the Patriots, whether it was Brady and Gronkowski, or whether it was Mahomes and Kelsey, how like the implement of both of those tight ends on those teams dynamically changed their hopes to winning the Super Bowl. Like they literally went out and they've won multiple Super Bowls as kind of a duo. So absolutely, I think that's the pick. And I know the need at offensive line, but I just feel like you don't miss on Brock Bowers if you take him at 7. Or, trade back and still pick him up. But you're running the risk of maybe another team who also thinks super highly of him picking him up, like the Jets, if you can't get above the Jets at 10. So absolutely. So I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see what happens. But yeah, no, I think Brock Bowers would be a solid pick and would just greatly enhance this Titans offense and would be there to stay for a long time. So
For sure.
yeah. Well, Rob, keeping with the kind of NFL draft that we've been discussing for a little bit now, um, there's been obviously some hype around JJ McCarthy. Of course, him winning the college championship with Michigan. Um, there's actually been even greater hype recently that he could even overtake some of these top quarterback draft prospects in Jaden Daniels, Caleb Williams, Drake May, um, and that he could even be better than some of those players that I just named. There's been a lot of people having him super high in draft lists going in the top 10. Rob, do you think that JJ McCarthy could go number 2 in the draft to Washington?
You know, if you had asked me this question a month ago, 2 months ago, I would have said that's insane. He's not going to be the second overall pick. He's going to be a second round pick. But over the past month, he's just been skyrocketing up draft boards. And I'm trying to understand this because when you look at JJ McCarthy, it's not like he has an insanely good arm. It's not like he has insanely good tape in college. It's not like he has anything that you would look at and say, yes, this guy would be the best quarterback in this draft class if it wasn't for Caleb Williams. Uh, but then you kind of look at the results that he has. All he's done since he got to Michigan is win. He led the team to a national championship. I think I heard one NFL guy that I was listening to. I forget who it was specifically, but he said that JJ McCarthy is the most pro ready quarterback right now because Michigan runs the most pro style offense in all of college football. So he can kind of understand the complexity of an NFL style offense a lot better than some of these other guys that you're looking at in the top of the first round. But at the end of the day, I mean, what he does is win, and that's the most important thing. But winning in college does not translate to winning in the NFL. I mean, you look at a guy like Kellen Moore, who had an insane amount of wins, like a record-setting amount of wins in college football. He was a career backup. He could not be a starter anywhere. He just didn't have the talent to do it in terms of his arm or anything like that. He had the brain. He could understand the offense better than anyone, probably even some of the coaches. He won a lot, but he didn't win those games with his arm the same way JJ McCarthy didn't really win a lot of the games he played in college with his arm. So I know he's going up draft boards because of his ability to read a defense, operate an offense, and win games. But he just doesn't have the abilities that some of these other guys do. He doesn't have the it factor of Caleb Williams. He doesn't have the arm of Drake May or the deep ball of Michael Penix Jr. He just, to me, he's the fifth best quarterback in this draft, and I don't think he should be number 2.
Yeah.
But you're looking at some of these other teams who might be considering taking him number 2. I forget who it was that said this, but there was one NFL insider who said, "Yeah, JJ McCarthy's the name I'm hearing the most when I talk to all my Commander sources as the number 2 possible overall pick." And then you brought this to my attention, just before we started recording, but there was a leak with a Commanders coach, or not a Commanders coach, an LSU coach, saying that he
Yeah.
expected Jaden Daniels to be the player for Washington
Yeah.
at number 2. So there's a lot of conflicting information right now. And is it possible the JJ McCarthy stuff is just kind of like a smokescreen to kind of throw teams off being used by the Commanders? It's possible. But I certainly think there's a real consideration of JJ McCarthy as a top 2 or top 3 pick. And I would not be surprised if he was the number 2 overall selection on draft night, just because of the way teams are thinking about him right now, ever since he kind of just rose up draft boards in the middle of March, which is crazy to think about, but that's what's happened. So yeah, he could absolutely be in play there.
Yeah, I definitely think 2 is too high, honestly. I know you mentioned that he's definitely in the top 5, if not the 5th in my rankings of all the quarterbacks that could go. Um, Obviously, I thought it was kind of funny with the LSU coach when he was interviewed about Jaden Daniels. He pretty much nonchalantly, I don't know if he meant to say this, it was an accident. Does he know? Does he not know? Because of course the organizations, whether it be the Commanders or another NFL team, they normally get pretty close when it comes to the coaches of their respective draft prospects. And so he pretty much nonchalantly pretty much said like, yeah, Jaden Daniels is a great player, yada yada yada, and he was definitely going to be a good fit for Washington. And that was it. And everyone's like, "Whoa, wait, what do you mean he's going to Washington?" type thing. And I think that, despite even that, obviously it seems to me that Caleb Williams will go number 1 overall. It seems like the Bears have set themselves up for that. And I think the best quarterback on the board at number 2 is Jaden Daniels, hands down. And I get JJ McCarthy can win and win and win. But playing on a team like Michigan comes with its perks because they have so many star players. They're back-to-back competitors every single year for the college, championship and playoffs and whatnot. Obviously, before the new uh, playoff kind of format this upcoming year is going to change. Um, LSU has been good, but they haven't necessarily been the team that gets all of the prospects coming out of high school, the 5-star athletes, all that stuff. There's a lot more work that you need to put into your wins, and yet LSU won a lot of games this past season with Jaden Daniels. There's a reason he won the Heisman. JJ McCarthy did not. So, I just think that overall Jaden Daniels is probably the better pick at number 2, and I think that JJ McCarthy is probably just a smokescreen that they're putting up. Don't know why the Commanders necessarily would be. I understand other teams, maybe enticing potentially other teams that need quarterbacks, Broncos, Vikings, Raiders, those guys to maybe trade up because they fear that their guy maybe took before, it comes to their position to pick in the draft. Interesting, you know, politic here when it comes to the draft board. But yeah, JJ McCarthy going number 2. I just don't see it happening. I think he's a good quarterback. I think he can obviously do a lot of great things in the NFL if he continues his progress. But I just don't think number 2 is the spot for him.
Yeah, no, I certainly agree. I will push back a little bit though on your comparison with Jaden Daniels, because you said that JJ McCarthy had a better supporting cast than Jaden Daniels, and that's certainly true. I'd say on the defensive side of the ball, but on the offensive side of the ball, I believe Jaden Daniels had much better talent around him. He had Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas Jr. at a wide
Mhm.
receiver, who are both going to
That's
be
true.
first round picks this year. Um, so I think maybe Jaden Daniels' stats and wins and all that sort of stuff might have been a little inflated just by his insanely good supporting cast. But I do agree with you that he is the second best quarterback in this draft and should probably be the Commanders' pick at number 2. I
Yeah.
like him a little bit better than Drake May, so I would hope he's the number 2 overall guy,
Yeah.
because he deserves to be. But we'll see what happens. I wouldn't be shocked if any of Drake May, JJ McCarthy, or Jaden Daniels was the number 2 quarterback, just with the how much discussions going on with all 3 of them as the possible number 2 overall pick.
Yeah,
Uh,
just to push back just even a little bit too on that too, because you brought up Jaden Daniels and his, the receivers that he had. Um, a lot of Michigan's success, even on offense, came from their running back Blake Corum, and I believe that's how you pronounce the last name.
yep.
And that's also something I think to put into play because yes, JJ McCarthy was a good quarterback to do what he needed to do in the Michigan system, But I would even argue that the running game of Michigan elevated their offense even more than even the passing game did. And so even though Jaden Daniels had a better supporting cast when it came to the receivers, he proved that he could get it to the people that he needed to. And that was their strong suit. And of course, with quarterbacking in the NFL, you need someone who can throw the ball. You need someone who can throw accurately. That's great to have a great running back, but sometimes you may not have that luxury. And so I think even that even boosts Jane Daniels over JJ McCarthy a little bit, just with how big Blake Corum had an impact on that Michigan offense. And I think he's going to even be picked pretty high in the draft as well. Blake Corum, running back, because what he was able to do is could essentially benefit a lot of teams that are needing running backs, even Dallas potentially. That would be
Yeah.
neat for you guys to pick him up.
No, I love Blake Corum. I don't think the Cowboys will draft him because he's one of those like bigger type of guys, and the Cowboys already have a fullback and Rico Dowdle who both kind of fill that role. Especially
Yeah,
if we bring Ezekiel Elliott back, who will also fill that role.
yeah,
So I imagine we'd probably be going for like a speed kind of guy, like what we had with Tony Pollard
yeah.
in the draft. But definitely Corum will be gone in the top 3 rounds for sure. He's a very impressive player, and he definitely, I think, masked a lot of the deficiencies JJ McCarthy has in running an offense. Because you're right, that's the best thing a quarterback can have is a dominant run game. Um, Absolutely, I think JJ Daniels and not JJ Daniels, God, JJ McCarthy and Jaden Daniels both had great supporting casts, kind of inflated, how good they are, made them look a little better than maybe they will be in the NFL. But Jaden Daniels absolutely deserves to be the second quarterback taken this year. Um, Keeping with all this draft talk, Carson, do you think the Vikings will not trade up this year? Maybe stand pat, ride with Sam Darnold?
I don't think so. I think that we're going to see a major Vikings trade up. I don't know necessarily what that's going to look like yet. I'm just prepared on draft night. Big news is going to hit. The Vikings are going to be up in the top 10. Don't know where exactly. I have a couple guesses, but um, getting those 2 first-round picks, especially the one that they have, and then getting that done from the trade from the Texans, it's just kind of setting this Vikings team up to make a move, to make a big move. I think if you sit back, because I believe the Vikings have 13, is 13 their pick? Uh,
11.
11. Okay. I think, but still, even at 11, 11, I don't know how easily you can guarantee your future quarterback is going to be there. There's a lot of teams picking ahead, and not even teams that need quarterbacks, but teams behind you, like the Broncos, like the Raiders. What if they traded up and they grab the guy that you need, or you wanted to have? I think for the Vikings, riding with Sam Darnold is not a good idea. They made some big offseason moves, as you even pointed out, Rob, especially in building up this defense, building up their defense. And they still have offensive talent with Justin Jefferson. And man, the JJs are on our mind, Rob. What's going on? Justin Jefferson, and a handful of others, TJ Hawkinson's on that roster. What a great Iowa legend. It's you rocking with Sam Darnold. It doesn't seem to me like what the Vikings need to do. And it seems like all the offseason moves, everything they've been able to do, the trade with the Texans to get the draft pick, it seems like it's setting this team up to trade up. Where we won't know until the draft, I don't think. And I think they're going to take their guy. Speaking even of earlier, JJ McCarthy, he could be that guy that they trade up to get. Because realistically, the highest I see them going, the Vikings, is third and stealing the Patriots spot. Not stealing, I guess, but trading with the Patriots. Because the Patriots, let's say they aren't high on Drake May, and let's say Caleb Williams and Jaden Daniels are taken 1 and 2. If they're not high on any of the other quarterbacks, it might behoove the Patriots to trade back, get more draft capital, because obviously their roster isn't good enough to compete this year anyways, and just continue a slower rebuild and maybe be able to pick up somebody maybe in a different draft or even later. Who knows? The Vikings could get up into that number 3 spot and they could take Drake May. They could take JJ McCarthy. They could or they trade with the Cardinals. They're right there at number 4. And so you have Williams, Daniels, May going to the Patriots. If they do like May, and then even McCarthy. Or maybe we see even them liking Bo Nix and they go up and grab him. I don't know. But I expect the Vikings to trade up from spot 11. I think waiting to see who falls into your lap at 11 isn't it going to be a good strategy for the Vikings, especially um, acquiring those multiple first round picks seems like a big wink to we're trading up. Where? We don't know, but we're going to go get our guy this year, which I think Vikings fans should be definitely excited about. So, yeah, I think they will trade up.
Yeah, I think they want to trade up. I don't know if they'll find someone to trade up or trade down with them because you think about who's at number 4. It's the Cardinals. They're going to take Marvin Harrison Jr.
Yeah.
Who's at number 3? Patriots. If they fall in love with Jaden Daniels and he ends up being on the board there at number 3,
Yeah.
they'll take him. They're not going to trade away from that. You look at number 5, Chargers really need a wide receiver. Malik Neighbors staring him in the face. I don't know if they would trade away from Malik Neighbors, given how he's supposed to be a generational talent. Then what? You have the Giants next, right? Number 6.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they need a quarterback really bad. If one of those top 4 guys is still there, are they going to
Yep.
trade away from that?
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, then you're at number 7. You're at the Titans pick. That might be the first team that feels like they could trade down. And what if the Raiders come in and make a better offer? You know,
Yep.
who knows what'll happen? What if the Vikings can't trade up? I mean, I don't know how easy it'll be for them to get to the top of that draft as much as they want to, very clearly.
Yeah.
But if they do trade up, I completely agree with you. I think JJ McCarthy would be a great fit for them because, who he reminds me of a lot? Kirk Cousins. You know,
Yep.
uh, got a great understanding of the game, probably a great leader. Not the most athletic guy, not the biggest arm. Needs some talent around him to do something. But when he has that talent, you watch out. He can lead a team to where it needs to go. Uh, so I think JJ McCarthy might kind of be a great Kirk Cousins replacement if that's what the Vikings want. They want another guy like Kirk to build around. I absolutely think you're right. They're going to try to trade up. That's why they have those 2 first round picks this year. It wouldn't make any sense for them to, acquire a second first round pick unless they were intending to trade up with it. It's just a matter of finding someone to trade up with. I will be very curious to see how this all plays out. I think a lot of analysts have said this, including Rich Eisen. The 3rd pick in the draft this year is probably going to define how the rest of the draft goes. Because
Yep.
if the Patriots trade out of that spot, then that's the Vikings moving up to get a quarterback, and then that will completely change how everything goes for the rest of the draft.
Yeah.
So, and they're I think the most likely to trade out of all those picks we just mentioned because I don't think they love a lot of the quarterbacks this year. I think they
Mm-hmm.
really like Caleb Williams, and I think they really like Jaden Daniels, and I don't think they're very high on McCarthy or Drake May.
Mm-hmm.
So they could certainly move out of that spot. And I think if you see the Vikings move up, it'll probably be with the Patriots, unhappy with the selection of Drake May or JJ McCarthy trading back, allowing the Vikings to go up and get one of those 2 guys.
Yeah. No, I absolutely. The funny thing is like I can see other than the Commanders and the Bears, everybody else beneath them, I could see them moving. Like literally, like there's reasons for the Patriots not liking the quarterback that they have. The Cardinals, which they're trying to, I mean, they have Kyler Murray. I don't know how big they are still on him. I know he's probably going to be their starting guy moving forward, but obviously Marvin Harrison Jr. is a no-brainer pick. But who else do you have on your roster? Like you don't really have much of anything else. It may behoove you again to trade back. And so you get more first round picks to build out more positions. That could even be positive. I could even see the Chargers being like, you know what? We need wide receiver. Let's trade down. We'll get the Vikings 11th and I think 23 is 23rd. Is that the other pick they picked up from the Texans?
23rd.
23. We'll take both of those picks. You slide up there. I mean, if Malik Neighbors is gone, we'll pick up Roma Dunze at 11. You know, like there's certain talent that can drop to them. I could see them even getting out of there. The Giants, maybe if offered the right package, they could maybe move. I don't know. I think they're the ones that are probably going to stay at 6. I still think they're going to go tackle at 6 rather than quarterback. Obviously, it makes sense why they would go quarterback. But I could easily, but even them, they could even trade out of that spot, get a later spot, and pick up maybe a guy like Bo Nix. or Michael Penix Jr. later on. Titans, as I've said before, they could trade out of that spot too to get more picks. Um, yeah, like you go down the list, like there is, I think the only two locks is Washington and Chicago. Everything else can be shaken up. And I think that's why Rich Eisen was right, and what you said was right as well. It can literally be like that third pick is going to define the rest of the draft. And maybe not even that third pick, but the picks after that as well. Because I think there's going to be so much movement with not only the Vikings, I kind of expect the Raiders and Broncos to make a move too. Mainly the Broncos. Raiders, I mean, that's just a hunch. The Broncos, you got Sean Payton, who's a mastermind of a coach. If he falls in love with a guy, just like he did with, Breeze in New Orleans, uh, they went up and got him, and no one really was expecting them to trade up and to get him. But if Sean Payton is like, you know what, this JJ McCarthy kid, we like him, we're gonna go get him, or someone else like that. I absolutely could see the Broncos even trading up. So
Well, I think Drew Brees was originally drafted by the Chargers, wasn't he?
was he
Yeah, I think they traded for him afterwards. But the
okay?
point I think you're making still stands is that they went out like aggressively and
Yes,
get two
and they
first
got
round
him. Yeah,
picks.
not in the draft, the trade. Yeah,
Yeah.
but still, yeah, they still they like Sean. If Sean Payton likes a guy, you're in. If Sean Payton doesn't like you, aka Russell Wilson, you're done. Type thing. So we could absolutely see the Broncos moving in directions where we may think like, oh, this is going to be another year. The Broncos have to figure it out. They could absolutely go up and get their star quarterback this year as well.
Yeah, a lot of the NFL guys I follow, I think this was even said on the Rich Eisen show, have been comparing Bo Nix to Drew Brees a lot because like he has like the
Mhm.
most laser accurate arm. So I think the Broncos might be targeting quarterback Bro Nix, Bo Nix with their pick.
That's
Um,
gonna be our new. That's the Red Zone Rodeo nickname.
Bro
Bro
Nix.
Nix. Yeah, you want Bro Nix on your team? He's just a bro, man.
He's just a bro. Yeah. Okay. Well, I got to call him that from now on.
There we go.
So I think the Broncos might stand pat at 12 because I don't think anyone's going to take Bo Nix before them. I think that's
True.
probably like the ceiling for how high he could go. Another interesting tidbit that I've been seeing floated around is that the Vikings in a trade up might not use both of their first round picks. Instead,
Mm,
if one way they might entice one of these top teams to trade with them is offer Justin Jefferson in one of their first in a package to move up, which I think is just insane. It's fun to think about. It's exciting to think about. And I definitely wouldn't completely rule it out either because, he's going to need that huge contract soon. He's coming off an injury. He was playing like arguably one of the greatest wide receivers of all time. So I still personally don't think I would trade him. But if that's what you feel like you need to do in order to go out and get your franchise quarterback, maybe the Vikings are desperate enough to make a move like that. Um, package 11 and Jay Jettis to the Cardinals, so instead
yeah.
of them getting Marvin Harrison Jr., they get Justin Jefferson. You
Yep.
know for a fact Justin Jefferson is going to be like an elite playmaker. You don't really know that with Marvin Harrison Jr. or any draft prospect for that matter. As good
Yeah.
as they were in college, every single draft pick is always kind of like a lottery ticket
Hmm.
because, there's always a chance there'll be a bust. With
Yeah.
a guy like Justin Jefferson, who's an established player, there isn't really a chance of that. Um, so I wouldn't completely rule that out. I still think it's a terrible idea, but I could see it happening in some world where the Vikings feel like they have to trade up to go get a guy like Jaden Daniels or something like that who might have fallen to number 4 somehow.
Yeah.
I would not rule it out.
Yeah. Neither would I. And I think like that's really the question the Vikings have to ask themselves. How big of a rebuild are we wanting to do offensively? Because you have assets, but if you're trying to rebuild so you can compete with the likes of the Packers and Lions and Bears in your division, having Justin Jefferson is certainly a great asset, but if you have nobody else, I mean, how many times is Justin Jefferson going to be double teamed, And obviously, we've seen how he's been able to get out of it. But another thing is that injury, as you mentioned, how well is he going to come back from that injury? It's definitely interesting to see what the Vikings will do. How much are they going to give up for a guy that they may believe could be the Patrick Mahomes for them? Or Tom Brady, but I don't really like using Tom Brady as a comparison. I think Patrick Mahomes is much better made a modern football world. So yeah, no, I mean that's kind of it. It's going to be really how much is the Vikings willing to sacrifice to trade up. And you're absolutely right. The Cardinals could absolutely bite at Justin Jefferson and trading down. Yeah, we'll take that. We're gonna go with that. We're gonna go with that. It'll be interesting to see if they even have Hawkinson up there on the trading block too as a potential guy to add to the mix. I know he's getting older, but man, that guy can ball. It must be the Iowa, in him because the tight ends that come out of that school is just
They're
crazy.
special.
They're
Yeah.
great. They are. But yeah. Well, switching things over a little bit, we've been talking about the draft. It's going to be super interesting. Couple weeks away. We'll talk about it next week. All the different possibilities and likelihoods and the politics at play, and it's going to be great how it all shakes out. It's just kind of crazy to think that the draft, literally, like other than maybe the first two picks as kind of being locked in, it could be shaken up, and that's just crazy that it could go literally either way. But let's slide back over to the UFL, Rob, and a lot of things to talk about after the kickoff weekend, where we got to see all 8 teams playing for the first time. We did mention before there is some of that kind of those question marks in regards to it's the first game. There was no preseason. A lot of things still need to be worked out. I'm sure by the later weeks of the season, we'll start to see more productive and or not productive, but similar production in terms of what they're able to do on the field. Week one is sometimes always a toss up when it comes to the spring leagues. But let's get into that a little bit, Rob. And one of the things that happened this past weekend was the Michigan Panthers ended up upsetting the St. Louis Battlehawks. So my question to you, Rob, we had them super high, number one on our Redzone Rodeo pre-week one power rankings. Rob, do you think the Battlehawks are overrated?
Uh, you know, I'm kind of leaning towards, yeah, they might be a little bit. Uh, I, in my mind, the way I had them pictured was this elite dynamic duo of wide receivers with a great quarterback waiting for their third elite dynamic wide receiver to come back to them. But even with two elite dynamic wide receivers, like they allegedly have, like they had last year, and an elite quarterback, like they had last year, uh, you need to be able to go out and score a lot of points, especially against a team like the Michigan Panthers, who might not be the best defensively, or at least we thought were not the best defensively. Um, so to see them struggle to score the way they did, it definitely shook my confidence in them a little bit. But like we were saying earlier, it's kind of like a preseason. They don't have Ja'Cory Pearson yet. They don't have their running back. There's a lot of pieces that are missing from that puzzle still. So I don't know if we could call them overrated necessarily just yet. And also, at the end of the game, when they put the ball in AJ McCarron's hands and told him to go win it, he did. He went down. He scored. He scored the conversion they needed. That was also on a throw from AJ McCarron. They trusted him to go do what he needed to do, and him and his receivers managed to get the job done. They kind of woke up there in the second half. Um, the defense let them down at the end ultimately on a crazy 64-yard field goal that we'll talk about later. You don't lose every day on a 64-yard field goal, so this loss was a little bit special. I think if their offense can kind of look like it did in the second half of this game, especially the fourth quarter for the rest of the season, they'll be back on top again of the power rankings soon enough. Because when AJ McCarron is in the zone and his wide receivers are in the zone, they're unstoppable. Uh, if they can get back to that place, then I don't think they're overrated at all. Especially once they add Pearson back into the mix and have the three best wide receivers in the entire UFL. But right now, until they prove they can do that, I'm gonna say, yeah, they are just a little bit overrated. They don't deserve to be the number one team on our power rankings like they were last week.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. I think that, um, they were a little bit overrated. I think we saw, as you mentioned, the old Battlehawks a little bit in the second half, what they were able to do. I do have to say though, Michigan's defense came out and showed up. That offensive line is not gelled completely for the Battlehawks. Of course, it being week one, no preseason, things like that are going to happen. But McCarron was being hit. And I think that was something that threw off the Battlehawks offense. But at the same time, the Michigan offense couldn't get off the ground. EJ Perry was really terrible, honestly, in my opinion, all game. Didn't really do much for the Panthers. So their defense kind of held up pretty well. And as you mentioned, yeah, losing on a field goal, a long field goal, that is an insanely long field goal. Um, that's kind of the worst way to lose it, but that doesn't really necessarily show that you're any less of a team. Um, that you just were bested by coincidence in a way. Obviously I know that the kick was really great and they obviously won, but it really seemed like the Battlehawks had control of the game for most of it with their offense and McCarron and some of those key players on that offense. And absolutely, I think by week 2 they should be up and running again, like their old selves. But yeah, maybe just a tad overrated.
Dad. It's interesting you mentioned the offensive line because I think PFF had their pass blocking rated as the highest this week.
Really?
But if you remember from way back when we were doing like the videos breaking down the teams, a couple weeks ago, months ago at this point, we said that the one weakness on the Battlehawks offense might be their offensive line because they
Mm-hmm.
were loaded at playmaker, they were loaded at quarterback, but if they couldn't block, that might be like their Achilles heel, the key to defeating an offensive powerhouse. And it kind of seems like that's what happened here in their game against the Panthers. Because you're right, it was a shaky performance from them for most of the game. And the fact that it was the highest rated offensive line by PFF, I think, speaks more to the failure of offensive lines around the league in general than it does to their success. But they were the highest rated, so I think they will probably gel and be better in the
Yeah.
following weeks than they were against the Panthers in week 1. But yeah, it was a surprise to say the least to see them, struggle to knock off a team that we had rated really low when we had them rated really high. So Panthers underrated, definitely. Battlehawks certainly a little overrated, at least at this point. We'll see what happens as the season continues. Speaking of surprises that happened this week, Carson, what surprised you the most about the Brahmas surprise win? Because this is another team, the Brahmas, that we had like I think either dead last or second to last on our power rankings last week.
Yeah, we had them dead last. We had them 8. Honestly, man, the team showed up. Um, I think honestly there was a lot of question marks, which is why we put them at 8th. From last season, we just didn't know how well Chase Garbers was going to be, as he was named their starter. But oh my goodness, Chase Garbers came out and played super well. The running game was amazing. Defense wise, the Brahmas really shut down the defenders, and Jordan Tamu, who we thought was going to lead another dynamic offense. Of course, Abram Smith was out for the defenders. Tore his ACL, out for the season. Unfortunate, but still, we thought that the defenders were going to come in to San Antonio and really play around with them a little bit and really show that this is the team that went to the XFL championship game and unfortunately lost to the Renegades. But that was the team it was last year, 9-1. They went 9-1 last year. And I get there's some players that are different. But a lot of the key pieces were still there. So it was very surprising to me that Tamu was kind of shut down. The receivers were shut down. And the Brahmas offense just grinded against the defenders' defense. I think, them not only just they didn't just like skate by and win like the Panthers did against the Battlehawks. They outright won. They didn't even let the defenders score a touchdown, which was crazy to me. All the defenders did was kick field goals, and they won by a number of scores. So that was really crazy for me to see. And the Brahmas are definitely not going to be last in our upcoming power rankings as a little sneak peek because they have shown that they have made the necessary additions and changes from even last season in the XFL. And they came out at home and showed their crowd, hey, we can go out and we can beat the 9-1 defenders the last season, and we can not only just beat them, but we can crush them and we can hold them to not even scoring a touchdown. And that's exactly what they did. Special talented group. I have to give it up though. I really do think that Wade Phillips being their head coach has such a big help for them, as he was the head coach of the Roughnecks last year in Houston. So, that I think super helped to recharge the team because he's such a genius when it comes to coaching and being a head coach. But absolutely, the Brahmas are a team that, if you're in the XFL conference, you need to watch out for because they are certainly going to be, after week one, if they continue this success, they're going to be a tough team to bring down.
Yeah, they're the only team in the XFL conference that won this past weekend. So they're number one. They're first in the division right now. So yeah, I got to say their defense was phenomenal. You just mentioned Wade Phillips, defensive mastermind, former head coach of the Dallas Cowboys. Really seems like he's changed their entire defense, the whole culture they had there, because their defense was not great last year. And
Mhm.
I don't think they've made any like huge additions in terms of players to their defense. So it seems like this huge seismic shift in defensive capability came from Wade Phillips coaching. And that's just a testament to how great he is and why he's been around the sport of football for as long as he has. And then Garbers, their quarterback, impressed me so much. He was way better than I thought he was going to be. Just,
Yeah.
last week we were talking about Garbers being named their quarterback. We're like, who even is that? We've never heard of Garbers before. And
Yep.
he just came out and impressed and showed the world that we don't really know what we're talking about sometimes. And some, a lot, I don't think anyone predicted that Garbers would be as good as he was.
No.
So, yeah, just huge shout out to him. Definitely, I think the biggest surprise in terms of individual performances this week was Garber and how well he played against that DC defender's defense, which I expected to be very good. He carved it up like it was nothing. So Brahma's all around huge surprise. Granted, this was only one game, week one, kind of the preseason. So
Yep.
we'll have to see if they can continue to play at this level as the season goes on, or if the DC defenders have just gotten really bad for some reason. Um, so take it with a grain of salt for now. But they did something. They proved that they're at least a better team by far than the DC Defenders, who we all expected to be really good. So they certainly deserve to be high on the power rankings this week. Like Carson said, sneak peek there. And they're only going to continue to rise up those power rankings if they keep playing the way that they did in week one.
Yeah. And honestly, there was, with both games we just kind of discussed, whether it was the Battlehawks, Panthers, or the Brahmas defenders, in these games, there was a kind of an insane moment that you all probably may have already heard about, maybe seen, the replay of, maybe a highlight of it. Super crazy plays. And in the Brahmas Battlehawks game, we kind of already talked about it. It was the 64-yard field goal by the Michigan Panthers kicker, Jacob Bates, or as people are nicknaming him now, Jacob Boots. And literally, not only did he kick it once, but he kicked two field goals from 64 yards because the Battlehawks iced him the first time, and he made both. And so first of all, not only was it just like, oh, luck, just like, oh, Hail Mary, type thing, kick it all the way through, try to get it. But he did it twice, and both were accurate and with distance. Crazy way to finish a game and a crazy just moment from this weekend. But in the Brahmas Defenders game, there was also another crazy moment. And this was basically a fake punt that the Brahmas did. Their punter, Brad Wing, I believe is his name. I could have the first name, Brad Wing. Okay. I knew it was Wing. I was like, Brad sounds right. But anyway, Brad Wing ends up basically hiking the ball like the quarterback. And on the offensive line, they had their center line up as the tight end. So he was eligible to catch the football. And when the play started, first of all, everyone, including myself, watching the game, I was like, what is going on? Like, why are you doing a fake punt here? Obviously, it's trickery. It's interesting. But then the play seemed to it started to break down. And all of a sudden, there was just this open, big man in the center of the field for the Brahmas. And Brad Wing just launches the football. And the center, who was again lined up in the tight end spot, catches the ball and runs it into the end zone pretty much and scores at the end of, I believe it was the first half. So that was just literally right before halftime. And I was just like screaming. I was like, what is this? What is going on right now? Because I've never seen that before. First of all, a center, being eligible in the tight end spot, the punter throwing the ball. And what was even crazier, even after that play, is the one thing I love about the UFL is the reporters are always right there. So right after the moment happens, they're interviewing the player. And I love hearing what these players have to say about big plays or big moments they used to make. And the punter was honest. He was like, we've run this play multiple times in practice and it never worked. And it happened to work in the game. And the even funnier part was they literally had one read. They had one read on that play. And he, of course, didn't obviously tell anybody who it was because then you're just giving away the play. But he said that read wasn't an option. It was covered. Something happened. And so he had to make up the play on the fly. The center who was in the tight end spot happened to be in an open spot and they connected. How crazy is that? But anyways, the question that I have for you, Rob, is what was the most insane moment of this weekend from you? Was it the 60-yard field goal or was it the touchdown fake punt to the center?
Yeah, well, first of all, I just want to say I think it's amazing that both of these things happened opening weekend. I think they'll both draw people to these games, as the
Absolutely.
season goes on, and it just shows, how crazy and exciting this league can be. It kind of sets the bar for the level of excitement I think we'll have every week going forward. Hopefully, it'll increase the viewership numbers and increase the attendance numbers because I think the attendance wasn't really great in terms of in-person attendance for the UFL's first week. Uh, Man, that's really hard to pick though between those two because I was watching both of those moments live and they happened, and my jaw dropped both times. I was like, I cannot believe what I just saw.
Yeah.
Um, Throwing a 50-yard touchdown from your punter to your center is absolutely insane, and I don't think we'll ever see anything like that again. In the NFL or the UFL, unless teams try to copy that play.
Yeah.
Um, but to me, that 64-yard field goal was just one of the craziest things I've ever seen because kicking a 64-yard field goal in the UFL is just as difficult as it is in the NFL, right? Doesn't matter, who's blocking for you or whatever.
Yeah.
It's essentially the same challenge. The only person who's ever kicked a 64-yard plus game-winning field goal in the NFL is Justin Tucker. So to set foot on that field after never kicking a field goal your entire college experience,
Yep.
only to match what the greatest NFL player of all time at that position ever has done, like his greatest achievement ever, on your first ever attempt, not only to do it once, but to do it twice in a row. Oh my goodness. That's like something out of a movie, right? That's not something that you would believe happened unless you saw it with your own two eyes.
Yeah.
It was crazy. It was by far, I think, the most insane thing I've ever seen in spring football, and one of the craziest things I've ever seen in football. Period. I'd put it right up there with what was that? Miraculous Hail Mary play the Vikings had against the New Orleans Saints in the playoffs 5 years
Yeah.
ago to win and go to the championship game in 2017. It's right up there with something like that. It's not something you ever expect to see, and when it happens, your breath is taken away. Uh, that punter to center play was crazy and insane. It would have been the craziest play of the weekend. It's just unfortunate that it happened to happen the same weekend as a 64-yard field goal by a guy who never kicked field goals in college to win the game. That will always be insane because this would have been just as difficult in the NFL as it was in the UFL. And he rose to the occasion, matched Justin Tucker for, the longest game-winning field goal of all time, and did something only the greatest kicker in all of football history ever has done on his first try. Man, I'll never ever not be impressed by that. That was insane.
Yeah, I agree. No, I think you laid it out perfectly. It has to be the field goal. It was honestly so crazy. I mean, I don't blame the Panthers for attempting it because what else were they going to do? They ran out of time. They couldn't get the ball any closer. And they were like, well, we might as well. But oh my goodness, Jacob Bates nailing it home. You're right. These moments happen very few times. And that was that was one of the moments that, of course you upset the Battle Hawks, we didn't see that coming. But as you mentioned, to match the NFL record for someone who didn't kick throughout college and to go out there and to do what basically Justin Tucker has done almost his entire life, what he's practiced and played to do, and paid to do, it's crazy. And honestly, there's already been NFL teams calling him. The Lions are one of them. So he already is getting calls after doing it twice. That's all it takes, which is what I love about the UFL. It just gives so many opportunities to these players who are out there, and it gives them a shot to perform for people, not only for us fans, but also for people who are like, you know what? That's an addition on the team that we need. And for moments like this is why I believe that the spring league is going to succeed, because everybody wants to compete for moments like this, and to have a moment like that, whether it was Jacob Bates or even Brad Wing, those are big moments for these players who, up until this time, I'm one of them, never heard of either of them. Never have heard of them.
Yeah.
So, their names are now up there in the news, and teams are looking at them. So it's it's always great to see these players succeed, in a league
Absolutely.
that's built for this.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it all like month long leading up to the UFL kickoff. We were saying, who's the next Brandon Aubrey? Who's the next Cavante Turpin? Who's the next guy from a spring league that's going to take that next step and be an all pro type talent in the NFL? And it seems like this guy, Bates, is certainly, putting his name in consideration for that. And I wouldn't be surprised if there were other players who did that this season as well. I think that's one of the most exciting things about the UFL for me personally, is knowing that some of these players are going to be, possibly on the Dallas Cowboys. I mean, we've had two of them now, two All Pros from the UFL or its associated leagues end up on the Dallas Cowboys as huge difference makers. Brandon Aubrey, the kicker, and Cavante Turpin, who's not only a dynamic wide receiver but an All Pro punt and kick returner. So it's crazy to think that a lot of these guys that most of us never would have heard of, but who have, end up having these great careers in the NFL, all start with these spring league games. And it's just what makes it so exciting and so fun to watch.
Yeah,
Uh, yeah, spring league football, man, it's really something. Uh, Speaking of spring league football, Carson,
yeah.
the Stallions, to me, they're like the Eagles of the UFL, right? They're the team that I cannot stand. That just makes me sick to my stomach because they have destroyed my hopes and dreams every year of USFL football that I watched. And now they once again destroyed my hopes and dreams by absolutely obliterating my favorite spring league football team. 3 years in a row now they've done it. I cannot stand this team. But Carson, at this point, do we have to admit that the Birmingham Stallions are the best team in the UFL?
I, you know, at the end of week one, absolutely. Absolutely. I think they 100%, squashed all the rumors of, is the USFL teams better than the XFL teams, which was kind of milling around uh, before the season kicked off. People were thinking, oh, the Renegades were going to squash the Stallions. The talent is just so much better in the XFL than it is in the USFL. The Stallions came out and really proved that otherwise. And so, you know, obviously it looked like the Renegades struggled just because it was also week one. I think there was some of those things happening as well. So I don't know if I can say the Stallions will be the best team in the league for the entire season, but at the end of week one, absolutely. I think that they deserve that number one spot. And I think that, uh, this is a great transition into our Redzone Rodeo Rowdy rankings, where we'll be covering our new power rankings after week one. And, as I've been mentioning, who do we have at number one, Rob? We have the Stallions.
Yeah, the Birmingham
And
Stallions.
there's a reason why they're at number one on our list, because they have exceeded expectations in terms of what people thought they were going to do in the game. And honestly, it may hurt you, Rob, but it wasn't really a close game. It wasn't like down to the wire, both teams battling, you
No, it was
know,
not.
it
It
was
was
it,
not
it
close.
was not. The Stallions hands down won that game. It wasn't the luck of a field goal from 64 yards. Uh they obviously had their own issues to work out, but overall they were able to get the job done, and they made the right, adjustments to make it work. And at the end of the day, that's what these top football teams do. They make the adjustments needed to ultimately achieve victory at the end of the day. And I think the Stallions are number one on our list because of that. And I think they're going to stay number one on the list until we have another team prove otherwise. So uh, for our UFL power rankings, week one, we have the Stallions at number one.
Yeah. And, the Stallions, I think they have something that no other team in the UFL has. They have managed to keep the same roster, the same coaches together for 3 years. They have
Mhm.
3 years of chemistry, 3 years of, being together, 2 years worth of championship culture, looking like a third. They just have something special there that no other UFL team can really match. As much as it pains me to say that, I think they definitely have their problems, especially throwing the football right now because they're still trying to figure out the quarterback situation, but they just have such a great system in terms of running the ball and playing defense and all this sort of stuff. It's just hard not to view them as the number one team in the league right now.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah. Number two on the power rankings, we told you they were going to be high, even though they were dead last week. We have the San Antonio Brahmas. The way they were able to just utterly dominate a team that we had very high in the power rankings and the DC Defenders, the way their defense looked, the way their quarterback play looked, all these areas of concern we had for them, they answered every single question and they answered it resoundingly. You can't win in such a dominant fashion and not shoot up the power rankings really fast, especially against a team we saw as very legitimate and very tough competition in the DC Defenders. Until they start looking like the Brahmas of old, the Brahmas of last year, they're just going to stay probably at that number two spot or even move higher depending on what happens with the Stallions. So very impressive for them.
Yeah. At number three, we have the Memphis Showboats. I thought they played a very stellar game against the Roughnecks, going up against a tough defense, which is what Case Cookus did. Um, yes, there were issues, but overall, I think this Showboats team did a really good job of exploiting some of those weak points, even in the Roughnecks defense, which is pretty locked down tough. And they were able to make things work in order to win the game. And it wasn't just their offense. It wasn't Case Cookus, throwing the football to Vinny Papali or others like that. It was also the defense. The defense came out, made big plays and takeaway plays. The Roughnecks at least fumbled once. No, not once. I'm sorry, twice. They fumbled twice, and both times that was huge game changing moments in terms of taking over the momentum of the game. And the Showboats did that right in the heart of the Roughnecks land, right in Rice Stadium in Houston. So I 100% expect them to be a very well team. Of course, again, we keep saying this over and over. It's week one. Anything can change. But they have definitely shot up a number of spots from our previous power rankings because of what they were able to do against, I would say, probably one of the better defenses in the league. They were still able to pull through and make some big plays.
Absolutely. They were really special in that game. At number four, we have one that's a little controversial. Definitely one of our bigger fathers this week, but they are rated above the team that just beat them this past weekend. At number four, we have the St. Louis Battlehawks. The reason we have them at number four is because, one, all of the potential their team has with injured players coming back, like Jacor Pearson, who was the best wide receiver in the entire XFL last year. Number two, like we said, their offense really seemed to click at the end of the game there. And if they play like that, I think they'll be beating a lot of teams this year, and they'll probably, like we said earlier, climb back up this board. Number three, they needed a 64-yard field goal to lose at the end of the game. So that's not something that you would make every weekend. It's not something you'd expect to happen every weekend. It's one of those scenarios where if these two teams played 10 times, you'd expect them to win probably 7 or 8 of those games. And the one or two that they did lose would be on a crazy freak thing like this, like a 64-yard field goal. So while the Battlehawks did lose this weekend, it was by, this much, a 64
Mm-hmm.
yard field goal. They still have a super talented roster that's only going to get better as time goes on. And that's why we have them at number four right now.
Yeah. And at number five, we have their opponent, the Panthers. And as miraculous as that 64-yard field goal was, there is some issues in regards to the Panthers offense. EJ Perry was hyped up to be this great caliber quarterback. He did not play it well at all. His throwing was off. I believe he rushed for 2 touchdowns, which shows, that agility there. Um, but all in all, it wasn't a stellar showing from the Panthers offense in terms of the quarterback play. The running game was decent and their defense was decent. But, as you mentioned, Rob, do I see the Panthers beating any of the teams above them? Obviously, they did beat the Battlehawks in a kind of freak scenario, but I don't see them beating the Battlehawks again if they replayed each other. And I don't see them beating the Showboats or the Brahmas or the Stallions. And so, obviously we'll end up seeing because, Stallions end up playing the Panthers this upcoming week. So we'll see how the Panthers end up doing. We may have them moving up a little bit more. But I do think, as we had mentioned, to win a game on a 64-yard field goal where your offense wasn't able to do much of anything to get you even in closer field goal range with mistakes, overthrown balls, underthrown balls, it needs some work. And so the Panthers are at 5 in our power rankings.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you consider that their defense gave up like a game losing score essentially, and then their offense was only able to get close enough for a 64-yard field goal at the end. That would lose you most football games where you don't have an insanely, amazing kicker coming out to save you at the end. At number 6, we have my team, the Arlington Renegades. We had them very high in our last power ranking, but they kind of just disappointed all around. They fell flat. They have holes all over the defense. Their offensive line is not very good. Their offensive coordinator is not very good. They're strong at quarterback. They're strong at wide receiver. They can throw the ball well, and as long as they can do that, I feel like they could always be, a team that could contend at some point. But right now, they're just not good enough. They're going to have to fix a lot of issues between now and next week if they want a chance at winning. Um, the season, as it goes on, we'll have to see if they manage to fix any of these holes they have. But if they play like they did this past weekend, I don't expect them to win a lot of games this season. I wouldn't be surprised if they miss the playoffs entirely. So as of right now, they are the number 6 team in the UFL.
At number 7, we have the DC Defenders. Honestly, their week 1 performance was mediocre to awful. Defense and offensive side of the ball. Their defense allowed Chase Garbers and the running game of the Brahmas to pretty much destroy them. Something that we definitely didn't see last year when it comes to the DC Defenders that went 9-1 and who had a stellar defense. Of course, I know some of those players are not the same, but still that core is still there. Something that was super shocking. And Jordan Tamu, their quarterback, did not play well. Um, you know, he certainly made the throws that needed to happen, but they could never do anything on offense except kick field goals. And as an offense, your goal is to score touchdowns, not kick field goals. And, there certainly were plays where Jordan Tamu made them. And unfortunately, though, for the DC Defenders, he didn't play well enough to lead that team to victory. And not even to lead to victory, to keep up with the Brahmas. They were playing from behind almost all game. And it wasn't just one or two, it was 2 scores behind most of the time. So when you're down like that, it's very difficult, especially when, you end up making mistakes like turning the ball over when you're in the red zone, almost scoring. That honestly, I think, was the whole momentum shift for the Defenders when Jordan Tamu threw that interception that the Brahmas literally almost ran back for another touchdown, I believe, nearing the end of the first half. That pretty much sealed it for me when it came to watching that game. So they have a lot of work to do. I expect them to be better next week. But for now, after their week 1 performance, not great, a lot of mistakes, they're going to be our number 7.
At number 8, Carson, we have your team, the Houston Roughnecks. They had a lot of issues in their game, a lot of sloppiness, a lot of mistakes. Their offensive line wasn't very good. Their secondary had some issues at times. The running game was basically non-existent. So as of right now, they're at number 8. Although I will say I think this is a team that we will see rise up because a lot of their deficiencies are because of injury. I think their pass defense will be much better once they get Reuben Foster and Chris Odom back. I think their run game will be much better once they get their guy Mark Thompson back there. So I don't think this is a team that will be staying at 8 for very long, but at least with the way their roster is right now, taking the injuries into account and the sloppiness of play, I think the Houston Roughnecks are at the number 8 spot.
Yeah, absolutely. I think they can certainly go up, but they need to fix some of the issues they had. Um, Otherwise, they're going to be it's going to be a long season.
Yeah, but I mean, you got all the pieces you need. You got an elite pass rush at some point coming back. You have a
Yep.
great quarterback. You have great run defense. I
Yeah,
think
we have the
the
pieces.
pieces are all there.
Got to put it together.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
All righty, guys. Well, that is our UFL power rankings following week one. Um, Be sure to come and see the channel next week when we do our week two power rankings. Gonna have a lot to talk about. We'll see how many of these teams shift around. We had a lot of movement from our pre-week one rankings, which was kind of cool to see. Our biggest jump was the Brahmas up 6 spots from our number 8 spot. And just crazy to see like how some teams can absolutely flip the script. So we'll see how they get affected by this upcoming weekend of play. But we're going to move on to a little newer segment we're adding because as we've been talking about these UFL games, we forgot last time to do kind of picks of the games, who we think are going to win some of the games. So we're going to be introducing our Redzone Rodeo Buckle Winner Picks of the Week, where we're going to be going through the 4 games this upcoming weekend on Saturday and Sunday, and we're going to be giving you just a quick, brief analysis who we think has a stronger team, who we think is going to come out on top. So, Rob, without further ado, the first game that's going to be happening is the San Antonio Brahmas versus the Memphis Showboats. This game's happening on Saturday at 12 p.m. Eastern time, noon Eastern time. Who do you think is going to come out on top in this one, Rob? How do you think it's all going to shape up?
Yeah, man, this is going to be one heck of a game. I mean, this is the number 2 team on our power rankings versus the number 3 team on our power rankings. So I think it's going to be really close. I think at the end of it, when you have 2 teams this evenly matched, that seem like they're just really skilled all across the board, the team that ends up winning is the team with the best quarterback. And to me, right now, that is the Memphis Showboats with Case Cookus. So although I think the Brahmas are one of the best teams in the entire league, and I think Arbor's much better than I expected him to be. He'll really have a chance to prove himself by going up against arguably one of the top 2 quarterbacks in the entire league this weekend, Case Cookus, and dueling him. I think Case Cookus will probably be a much bigger challenge for the Brahmas defense than Garber will be for the Showboats defense. And I think Cookus will probably lead his team to a very close victory. But for me, the Showboats are probably going to win this game.
Yeah, I agree. I would definitely go Showboats. Yeah. All right, moving on to the next game, we have the Arlington Renegades versus the St. Louis Battlehawks. This is going to be the Saturday evening game for this upcoming weekend at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. This is going to be an interesting matchup. I think this is going to be a redemption game for both teams. I think both teams certainly came off of week one losses that they probably didn't see coming in terms of how, they played and a chance to really right some of these wrongs. I think, though, looking at this game, I think the Battlehawks are going to come out stronger. I think we're going to see a different team than the one that played against the Panthers. I think it's going to be much more gelled, and they're going to start to, assume the form of this team that we had been hyping up all off season as being the number 1 team. Obviously Pearson's not going to be back yet. So the Renegades and Rob, you don't have to worry about him yet, but I think that for the first matchup between the Battlehawks and the Renegades, I think that the Battlehawks will end up taking the prize.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to disagree with that given the way the Renegades played this week. I will say their biggest weakness was against the run. They were okay against the pass, and the Battlehawks don't necessarily have the best run game. So maybe the game will be a little closer than people are expecting, but I still expect the Battlehawks for sure to come out on top. The next matchup we have is the Stallions versus the Michigan Panthers. I think the Stallions will win this one easily. I mean, in my opinion, they're the best team in the league, like we just talked about. The Panthers kind of maybe a little overrated after that very, very narrow win against the Battlehawks in week one. They're just not a very good team. Whereas the Stallions are like loaded at a lot of different positions, and I think it'll be a quick and easy win for Birmingham.
Absolutely. I agree. I think the Panthers certainly were hyped up after that 64-yard field goal win against the Battlehawks. As we talked about before, there still is some holes offensively wise. I think the Stallions are going to be able to lock them down. I actually don't expect this match to be close. I think the Panthers defense is going to show up, but there's only so much your defense can do when they are on the field for probably most of the game. I think the Stallions are going to definitely have the majority of the possession. And as a result, I think they're going to come away with the win. Our last game to talk about is my boys, the Houston Roughnecks, against the DC Defenders. This game is going to be in DC, 4 p.m. on Sunday. And just for clarification, the Birmingham Stallions Panthers game is going to be the earlier day game on Sunday at noon Eastern time. But anyways, getting back into the Roughnecks Defenders, I'm actually going to go with my Roughnecks here. And I might be going out on a limb here by saying this, but I do think that out of both teams, the Roughnecks have the easiest time fixing their mistakes than how the Defenders played against the Brahmas in San Antonio. I think if the Roughnecks cut down those penalties and, for example, Mark Thompson comes back and Chris Odom comes back, Reuben Foster, he went down in that game in week 1. But thankfully, it was just a calf cramp. It was initially reported it was a calf sprain, just a calf cramp. He was perfectly fine after the game running around. So Reuben Foster's fine. I can only imagine what's going to happen if Odom comes back to that defense and Mark Thompson comes to rejuvenate this offense. So if that's the case, I think the Roughnecks could walk into DC and really spoil the Defenders' chances at winning, especially reeling after a terrible loss to the Brahmas, which was kind of unforeseen. I think that the Defenders will have a tough time kind of figuring out both sides of the ball and fixing it. Obviously, I think this game's going to be close. I think it's going to be really a defensive battle. Who can halt each other's offense the most? But I'm going to go with the Roughnecks because they have a better defense, and I think that Jarrett Guarantano can really be the guy that the Roughnecks need to lead a winning drive.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think a rejuvenated Roughnecks team would destroy the Defenders squad we saw last week. I think the Defenders' only chance of winning this game is if Tamu comes back and starts playing like he did last year, and their defense comes back and starts playing like they did last year. Short of a redemption from the Defenders and a restoration to what they were last year, I think the Roughnecks will beat them, and the Defenders will be at the number 8 spot in our power rankings next week. That's fully what I expect to happen. And those are our locks of the week here on the Redzone Rodeo, our buckle winner picks of the week, I should say. Moving on to our Redzone Rodeo clowns of the week, one of my favorite segments.
Here we go,
I
Rob.
think the biggest clown of the week are all of our UFL takes from last week. Pretty much everything we said, from our power rankings to who we expected to be good, to why, all of it was wrong. I think our power rankings were almost completely backwards from how the league itself ended up shaking out, outside of having the Stallions at number 2. They should have been number 1. Everything else was all topsy-turvy. Pretty much every game prediction, everything we said, just completely wrong. But that's the beauty of spring football. You never know what to expect. It's impossible to predict. No one out there could have predicted what happened. I think every team that was like a betting favorite to win almost lost, outside of I think the Stallions Renegades game. So even Vegas doesn't know what's going on. We don't know what's going on. That's what makes things fun here. But all of our takes from last week's episode definitely Redzone Rodeo clowns of the week for sure.
Absolutely. And that's, as you mentioned, it's always the fun part about doing this. If we were accurate 100% of the time, then it wouldn't be fun. It's great to kind of look back at some of your takes and be like, hey, you know what? That was really wrong. But, let's just keep doing it because we're eventually going to land on some of them. But absolutely, yeah, there was some very interesting takes we had last week that certainly didn't shape up from watching the first week, the inaugural week of the UFL. Something that also really grinds my gears is not only this individual that I'm going to name, but a lot of talk around the Tennessee Titans as of recent. But the man I'm going to be labeling as the Redzone Rodeo clown of the week is Nick Wright. Now, Nick Wright has kind of echoed what has been this kind of banter between the other NFL fan bases in regards to all of these off-season moves that the Titans are doing, whether it's Calvin Ridley, L'Jarius Sneed, Lloyd Cushenberry, some of these, Tony Pollard, almost forgot your Cowboy guy. These guys have all been great additions for the Tennessee Titans and only are making them better, fixing some holes that they had, which it just makes it super insane to me that there are individuals out there who think that these moves are only hurting the Titans organization and making them a much worse team than they were this past season, which is super, super crazy. But the one thing I want to bring up, because there's just honestly too much to bring up in regards to that, the one thing I want to bring up is what Nick Wright said NFL shows is that he said that the Tennessee Titans were going to have the first overall pick in the 2025 draft. And someone replied with, well, then why are they making all of these moves in the offseason? Why would they be making all these moves if they're just going to end up having the first overall pick? And Nick Wright, the genius, if you want to call him that, said that the Titans are a poorly run organization. Nick Wright, what are you talking about? These moves not only just absolutely build up the Titans team, plug the holes, but literally other teams around the league, like the Eagles, who you are praising, by the way, for what they were able to do, they're doing exactly what the Eagles are doing. So what's the difference? Taking big name players that may be a little bit older and plugging holes that literally on your roster, there were problems this past season. Other teams are doing that, and you're not calling them out. What are you talking about? It makes no sense to me. All of this Titan slander and hate. I can tell you if Calvin Ridley went to the Patriots, all the talk of the town would be Calvin Ridley's the best. Oh my goodness, the Patriots could be that next best team. No, he goes to the Titans and everyone's talking, oh, he's old. He's washed. Same thing with Pollard. Let's say Pollard goes to the Eagles. Oh my gosh, like look at this. Pollard's going to be one of the best guys, so much better than DeAndre Swift. Goes to the Titans. What a washed guy. He can't even play football. What is this slander? You know what? I just want to say, Nick Wright, you're a joke. And at the same time, you all watch out for the Titans next year, because if you think that their offseason moves was pathetic or stupid and that they're going to have the first overall pick in the 2025 draft, y'all are crazy. And let's just see what happens on the field, because I think this Titans team is going to be a lot tougher than what you saw next year.
Yeah, it's a shame because I really like Nick Wright too. He's one of the only like TV guys that's consistently fair to the Dallas Cowboys. But yeah, I think if you're going to criticize the Titans, you should also be criticizing the Eagles. Not doing that definitely makes you a Redzone Rodeo clown of the week. Another take that we have here on our clown of the week segment on the Pat McAfee show. He was interviewing The Rock before Dwayne The Rock Johnson, who originally was an owner of the XFL and is now a partial owner of the UFL. Before the UFL season kicked off, and he made this. Pat McAfee made the statement to The Rock that the XFL is better than the USFL, the two leagues that merged, and said that the XFL teams would probably beat the USFL teams consistently because the XFL teams had better rosters. The USFL is 2-0 following this past weekend. They have not lost to an XFL team yet. So the take that the XFL teams are better than the USFL teams gets Pat McAfee on the Redzone Rodeo Clowns of the Week.
Absolutely. Yeah, he's certainly wrong about that. Stallions showed up and beat the Renegades, and so did the Panthers when it came to the Battlehawks. So two interesting wins that, obviously I think the Stallions was a bit more understandable. Panthers was a complete shock, but still, yeah, XFL talent and rosters is better. Well, looks like we had the USFL come out and they're now 2-0. And we have not had an XFL kind of based roster that has beaten a USFL based roster yet. So we'll see how week 2 shakes out in regards to some of those possibilities. But as of right now, the USFL is winning in that kind of rivalry between USFL and XFL. But I think it's all fun and games because at the end of the day, we're all part of the UFL now. And I think that rather than try to divide ourselves and, well, which league was better. You know, it's a fun rivalry, but I'm glad that we're all can join in together in spring football together because um, creating opportunities for these players is combined effort, and it's good to be that way. But Pat McAfee, come on, man, what were you thinking? Were you just trying to show up for The Rock? You wanted to, look pretty for him? Looks like you were doing something like that, but unfortunately, you're gonna have to eat your words this time. The UFL is here, and the USFL rosters have been rocking out week one.
That's right. Now this guy is absolutely the biggest Red Zone Rodeo clown of the week. He's just a clown in general in life. Man, you lose at life. You are the biggest clown ever. This is Rashee Rice, the Kansas City Chiefs wide receiver. He was a few nights ago caught in a drag racing incident in Dallas, where he was drag racing sports cars with someone else in the Dallas area, got into a huge car accident, and instead of staying there and taking ownership like a man, he fled the scene like a little coward. The police had to launch a search for him. They spent all day looking for him, all weekend. I think I remember seeing these headlines under the UFL games until they finally found him. And now his lawyer said Rashee Rice is, he's cooperating with the police and doing everything that's required of him. Rashee Rice, you are a clown. You literally, all you have to do is play a game and not get in trouble for the rest of your life, and you will be a millionaire,
Yeah.
multi millionaire just from playing a game. All you have to do to keep that happening is not get in trouble. And you do something stupid like this, drag race, and then run away from the scene of the crime. What are you thinking? You are the absolute biggest clown this week, hands down. Come on, you had such a bright, promising future and you threw it all away so you could drag race. What are you thinking? Clown. You are a clown, sir.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. I don't know how he's going to be punished for this, but yeah, it's crazy, honestly, all around when you have these NFL players who are making millions, and for fun they're doing stuff that they shouldn't be doing, and they're jeopardizing what they have tried to do their entire life, which is make it to the NFL and be a professional athlete, putting that all in jeopardy. It's just crazy to me. Anyone that does that is absolutely a Red Zone Rodeo clown of the week. But Rashee Rice, come on, man. Drag racing you could do on video games and you don't get in trouble. Come on. You can really don't do it. Don't do it, man. Now you're
You are
paying the
rich enough.
repercussions.
You are rich enough to rent out a private racetrack and
Yeah.
buy a race car. Do it that way. Don't do it in the middle of a public street where you can get into a car accident and then running away from the scene. Oh my God, this is so disgustingly stupid. You are such a clown. Good
Yeah.
Lord. Good Lord, Rashee Rice.
How do you come back from that? I don't know. I'm just always I'm gonna hear Rashee Rice and be like, oh, that's the drag race guy that just wrecked his car and ran away.
Him, Henry Ruggs, Jalen Carter. Come on, guys. What are you doing? What are
Yeah,
you doing?
exactly. Exactly. It's crazy. It's crazy. Well, I think that is going to wrap up the episode for us tonight. Um, Again, as we mentioned even at the start, we want to thank everybody who tunes in and spends their time watching these videos. One thing that we've been doing recently is creating some shorts. We seem to get a lot of attention in regards to that. So be on the lookout for more of those. Thank you for supporting us with those, sharing them with your friends, sharing this video with your friends. Um, Absolutely love spending this time that we get to have every week to record these things, talk football, bring you kind of the best content that we can. It's always a lot of fun, and it's something that as Rob said multiple times, and I'll even repeat, we look forward to every single week. So thank you again for your support and everything. And yeah, feel free to continue on the conversation. We love talking football. Please, if you want to comment down below, if you have thoughts or anything about anything we said, maybe you disagree, let us know what you think. We love to hear from you. We love to hear your opinion as well on things. And hey, if there's a topic next week you want us to cover, drop us a little comment down below. We'll think about it and we'll see about how we can add that to our next upcoming show. Any way that we can get you guys more personally involved. Spread the Red Zone Rodeo and get you all involved with us as well. So thanks again for all the support that you guys give to us.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like you said, Carson, I look forward to doing this every week. This is one of my absolute favorite parts of the weekend to record this with you. So, anyone who watches it and supports it, thank you so much. It's amazing that we're getting anyone to watch this, never mind as many people as we do. It's just the most fun thing that, I think we could ever do. So, yeah, this is great. Another thing, if you have suggestions for Redzone Rodeo Clowns of the Week, you should leave those in the comments too, because that would be really funny to read through. So,
Yes, absolutely. And we'll be finding new ways to get you all involved too. We're gonna try to plan on doing some more live shows once we get kind of a couple of things under our belt. But get you all more actively involved rather than just the comment section of our videos. Maybe have a even little kind of text box on the side while we're filming, and we can answer questions and whatnot. Especially as the UFL is getting bigger. I'm sure all of the newer fans out there that are like, hey, this is my first thing in spring football. If we can help you out finding your team, helping you out, knowing about what's going on, we absolutely will love to do that as well. So absolutely. But yeah, thank you again, guys. I hope you have a great week. If you aren't already, please consider hitting that subscribe button, joining the channel, joining the rodeo, as we like to call it. And yeah, again, thanks again. I can't say thanks enough. So I'm sorry if that's the 50th time I've said it, but we appreciate you all. So without further ado, Rob, are we missing anything else? Anything else we missed in covering?
Not a thing.
Alrighty. Well, guys, get ready for week 2 of the UFL. Draft is in a couple weeks. We'll see you all next week. And until then, have a great week. All right, guys, signing off. See ya.